Hello, learners. Welcome to the sixth lecture on Mahesh Dattani's Tara. This is the sixth of 10 lectures in which we will engage this very complex and powerful play through a wide range of theoretical, cultural, and historical frames. In this lecture today, we will be examining Mahesh Dattani's play Tara through the frames of medicine, technology, and gender. In order to introduce my discussion of these very important themes, I want to briefly speak about the life and career of a very famous and influential scholar by the name of Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault was born in the year 1926 and died in 1984. He's a very influential philosopher and social theorist, and he's also a very powerful historian of modern Europe. His key works are many, but I'll just name two. The first key work is A History of Madness, first published in the year 1960. Another very key work is The Birth of the Clinic, published in the year 1983. In both of these works, Foucault first laid the foundations of an idea that would later become the most important idea, the most powerful idea that shaped his intellectual map. And this idea was a story about how society becomes modern. Societies become modern by way of 3 or 4 steps, and I have briefly summarized these steps as follows. Societies become modern by identifying themselves as normal. That is to say, a society becomes modern when a significant portion or a significant community of people within that society identify themselves as normal. This community of people identifies itself as normal by isolating what it defines as abnormal. And how does this distinction between the normal and abnormal become real? These people who are in power define what is abnormal by identifying and isolating things such as disease, illness, and madness. Thus, in 17th and 18th centuries in Europe, according to Michel Foucault, 3 types of institutions began to emerge all over the continent. These were clinics, that is, the earliest forms of hospitals. Then there were asylums in which people diagnosed with mental illness were confined. And then there were prisons, which were institutions where criminals were confined in order to improve them and to isolate them from society. So this is why these 3 institutions began to spread out all over Europe in the 18th century. Now, the rise of these institutions, according to Michel Foucault, heralds the shift from an ancient to a modern regime of modernity. In the realm of medicine and medical care, we can easily understand this shift as a shift from a world in which doctors managed symptoms to a world in which doctors were charged with curing diseases. This was a shift from people to bodies. This was a shift from human beings to organs within human beings. One way to understand this shift is to think about a pre-modern system of healthcare as one in which if someone felt ill or was feeling weak or didn't have the strength to walk or didn't feel the energy to go through the normal functions of everyday life, then the doctor simply assigned people around this sick person duties of caring for this person. In a modern system of medicine and medical care, the doctor would not simply try to manage the symptoms of this sick person, but rather they would try to decode from their symptoms which organ of this sick person is undergoing a disease or illness. And by identifying which organ of the sick person needs specific treatment and care, the doctor would try to cure the disease. So instead of looking at the human body as a holistic mess or as a holistic mass made up of multiple organs, the doctors instead began to focus on individual organs. Therefore, this shift also made a change in the field of justice and criminology. From counseling criminals by making them listen to religious pastors and fathers in the churches, these individuals were put in jail. Also, there were researchers, there were scholars who devoted time and energy to understanding criminal elements in human psychology. That is to say, instead of trying to understand each act of crime as an isolated incident, there was a desire to understand what was universal to all criminals per se. This was also evident in the field of sexuality. Instead of trying to simply believe that different people had different desires, there was an attempt to create sexological types. One of the claims of Michel Foucault is that homosexuality was not invented by the Greeks, but rather it was invented by the Victorians. That in ancient Greece, the choice of whether a man had sex with women or men did not lead to an identity. A human being could not be identified as a different type of human being based on their sexual preferences. In other words, the choice of who a human being wanted to have sexual relations with was not important for identifying the type of human being they were. However, in 18th and 19th centuries in Europe, that choice was no longer innocent. One could not simply choose who to have sexual relations with. Instead, based on one's choice, one was identified as a homosexual or a heterosexual. Needless to say, such identifying practices designated one preference as normal and one preference as abnormal. Heterosexuality was automatically considered normal, while homosexuality was automatically considered abnormal, unnatural, and therefore criminal. So you can see who stands to gain and who stands to lose from these efforts to identify and understand types. Now, these discussions of how societies become modern by inventing medicine and making different types or segregating human beings based on their bodies is very important for understanding this play, Mahesh Dattani's Tara. On one hand, Tara and her sibling Chandan would not exist without modern medicine. Why do I say this? Those of you who've read the play will know it required a very, very modern and sophisticated procedure involving the most advanced level of education, highly educated and experienced doctors, as well as very expensive medical equipment available only in one of the most elite hospitals of Bombay, that the surgery could be completed which separated the conjoined twins. That is to say, Tara and Chandan were born in one body. There were two human beings, two babies in one body. There were three limbs. Most of the vital organs were separate, they were not shared, but there were important structural bones and anatomical parts of the body that were shared between these two babies. And in most cases, such conjoined twins do not survive beyond a few months because the body cannot sustain the load of two human bodies in one system. However, in this case, because there happened to be a doctor who had the experience, the equipment, the inclination, and the ability to perform this unheard of and unprecedented surgery and to separate the two twins, that the two could live. Therefore, the central characters, that is Chandan and Tara, exist because of modern medicine. The play also exists because of modern medicine. The play creates a character named Dr. Thakkar. Dr. Thakkar is the doctor who performed, the lead doctor who performed the surgery that successfully separated the twins and gave them a few years of life. Medicine is a character because disability is a frequent and pervasive theme in the play. Medicine is a theme in the play as well because the twins frequently refer to their surgeries, transplantations, and physiotherapy. At one point, Tara says that they undergo surgery like brushing their teeth. Surgery is so common to these twins, it's like brushing teeth is to normal people. The twins also have prosthetic limbs because when they were separated, it was not possible for them to have two completely functional limbs. As I mentioned earlier, the twins were born in one body, and this body had 3 limbs, not 4. We will understand later how Bharati's decision to give Dan this extra limb instead of Tara, whose body was naturally connected to that limb, has disastrous consequences. But for now, we need to understand how medicine is a character, a theme, and the context of Mahesh Dattani's play Tara. How do you understand the importance of medicine to the tragedy described by the play? We understand this from the moment Dr. Thakkar appears on the stage. How does Dr. Thakkar appear on the stage? As you know, in the beginning, Dan, that is Chandan, who's grown into a young man, Chandan is a struggling writer in London. Chandan is struggling to write a new creative work, compelling work. And he starts by writing a play named Twinkle Tara. Even after he starts writing the play, he struggles to actually begin the play. And he has a moment of inspiration, a breakthrough moment, when he introduces Dr. Thakkar on the stage and invites this doctor to talk about the kind of things that he did in order to give these two people a life. Dr. Thakkar is therefore central to Dan's existence. And Dan finds that he is able to write a play, he's able to get his creative energies flowing by writing about Dr. Thakkar on the very first page of his play. This is also a commentary on medicine, technology, and ethics because Dr. Thakkar says how they had to make certain choices. They had to choose who to give the third limb. Now, medically speaking, there was no need to make a choice. As we learn in the play, Dr. Thakkar notices that the third limb on this body of the two conjoined twins is naturally connected to Tara's body. However, based on intervention, choices, advice, and deliberation by Bharati and her father, the team of doctors, the surgeons led by Dr. Thakkar, is prevailed upon to make a decision. They amputate the limb from Tara's body and they try to attach it to Chandan's body after surgery. That doesn't happen, however. Chandan's body rejects this limb and it has to be amputated again. The result of this intervention is that Tara and Chandan both lose a limb. This is not so much of a loss for Chandan because Chandan was never born with a limb in the first place. It is, however, a huge loss for Tara and it leads to complications for her. She grows up to be weak, sickly, and eventually dies much, much younger than Dan. So therefore, the tragedy of the play owes its existence to the importance of modern medicine. However, it also underlines the fact that medicine is not a universal good. Rather, medicine is only as good as the people in charge of administering it. That is to say, medicine can do good or bad depending on the people who are in charge, people who are in control of that medicine. In this case, the sophistication, the ability, and the inclination of this team of doctors is undermined by the sexist assumptions of Bharati, that is Tara's mother, and her father, that is Tara's grandfather, who decide that because there are three limbs on this conjoined body, it would be more expedient, it would be better, it would be profitable, it would be useful, and it would be generally a better idea to give that extra limb to the male child than to the female child. That sexist patriarchal assumption limits the value of medicine. It puts a very severe limit on what medicine can and cannot do. Thus, through this play, Dattani invites readers to think about the ethics of surgery and the separation of the two twins. Now, the word normal has a lot of discontents. Jeanette Venterson's memoir, published in the year 2011, is titled, Why Be Happy When You Can Be Normal? In this play, many people feel the pressure to be normal. And this pressure creates a lot of frustration. Let us begin by thinking who in real life feels the pressure to be normal. There are two ways to answer that question. On one hand, there are those who are born into bodies that are not automatically rewarded by society. That is to say, women, people with darker skin tones, people with sexual configurations. These are people who absolutely feel the pressure to be normal. On the other hand, it is also possible to answer that question in a different way. In a relative sense, in every situation, one party feels normal, one party feels rewarded and recognized, while the other party is treated as if they were disabled, as if they were not normal, and they should have been normal. In other words, they are forced to make themselves normal. They are forced to inhabit this world by making constant effort to change who they are. That is not fair, but it is real. One example of this relative pressure is the tension between women and trans women. Recently, there was a major controversy which began on social media but spread to all over the world based on this question of whether menstruation was an absolutely essential category for claiming the benefits, the privileges, and the challenges of womanhood. The trans women movement decoupled menstruation as a biological act from the identity of womanhood. So much so that many trans women began to actively disparage normal cis womanhood as something that actively excluded trans womanhood. So the lesson to take is that in every situation, there is some party who feels rewarded and recognized, while others feel unrecognized, not seen, as if they are not normal, but they should be normal if they are to get the dignity and the respect that they deserve. Nobody is normal in Tara. The word normal comes under tremendous pressure in this play. Words like freak, ugly, and Vantara refer to multiple layers of meaning and discourse. On one hand, these words refer to the societal pressure. They refer to the difficulty of living in a world that expects and demands normalcy. These words also reflect the human desire for a community. All human beings want to be a part of a community in which they feel they are, in which they feel that they belong. For validation, all human beings seek validation. In a society whose value systems are founded on the distinction between normal and abnormal, words like freak both include and exclude. By calling someone a freak, people validate themselves. People say that because they themselves are not freaks, that because they are different from others who are freaks, they themselves belong in a community. It's very tragic, but this is how language works in our society. Languages of exclusion, inclusion, and selfhood. Let us try to understand this word freak. We first come across this word freak early in the play in Act 1, Scene 1, in which Dan, who's trying to write this play, struggles with finding the words and calls himself a freak. In other scenes, the word freak is used in less sympathetic ways, especially when girls in the neighborhood talk about Bharati and Tara. Mental illness occurs. Due to mental illness, Bharati is called a freak by these girls in the neighborhood, that is Rupa and Prema. Physical disability is also a reason for some characters being mistreated and being called freaks. Rupa calls Bharati one Tara, meaning a crazy person. Tara calls Rupa ugly because she has, and these are the words that Tara uses, uneven tits. Rupa calls Tara ugly because she has a prosthetic limb. This moment when Rupa calls Tara ugly because she has a prosthetic limb is foreshadowed early in the play ever since the two girls first meet. There's a tendency that all the children have in this neighborhood, that is, they tend to stare at the prosthetic limbs that these two siblings, Tara and Chandan, have. The twins notice this, but their initial response is not to react with anger or frustration. Instead of anger, the two twins try to be as kind and generous because they understand that normal people don't understand that Tara and Chandan have a special condition, that is, they were born as conjoined twins, due to which they needed surgery, due to which they now have prosthetic limbs. Since most people don't have the empathy to engage in this act of imagination, Chandan and Tara forgive them, forgive their staring, forgive their mistreatment. Now, what is the effect of this language? Words like freak, ugly, and one Tara. On one hand, these words signify certain powerful emotions. They signify cruelty and insensitivity. They suggest that people who call others freaks and ugly for being disabled, for being mentally ill, that the people who use such words are actually highly insensitive. That this insensitivity comes from a lack of imagination, a lack of empathy, a lack of intellectual and emotional labor. People who call disabled people freaks do so because they cannot foresee that they themselves may be disabled as easily as others. They fail to put themselves in the situation of other people. What is the playwright trying to do by having characters speak like this? The playwright makes audiences become aware of their own guilt about the possible mistreatment of human beings around them. Audience members may become conscious of how they may have unwittingly made fellow human beings feel that they are disabled, abnormal, or otherwise different from those human beings who enjoy all benefits of society. Reversing the gaze. Now, what happens when disabled people use similar words for able-bodied people? That is to say, what happens when the so-called disabled people use derogatory names to describe the so-called able-bodied people? Now, just to understand this discussion briefly, in this play, Chandan and Tara can provisionally be labeled disabled from the perspective of other characters like neighbors, children, etc. Now, these two characters, Chandan and Tara, use terms like brain cell impaired and ugly to describe other characters. At one point, when Tara goes to her physiotherapy session, she sees the term mobility impaired in order to refer to someone who needs help walking. Upon seeing this phrase, mobility impaired, Tara comes up with another joke like phrase, that is brain cell impaired. She uses the word brain cell impaired to refer to the children in the neighborhood who frequently bother Chandan and Tara. Is this fair? Is this okay? Can disabled people call other people disabled? Is stupidity a disability? In other words like ugly are also used by these two characters. In one sense, the audience are invited to believe that Chandan and Tara are right. That is to say, Dattani suggests that those who are disabled are only human. They are not disabled or able bodied. They are simply people who have been excluded, made to feel abnormal by normal people. For excluding these human beings, these normal people are, in a sense, disabled. Now, by having Chandan and Tara use words like freak, ugly, and brain cell impaired for other people, Dattani is also suggesting that these characters are wrong. That is to say, Dattani suggests that disabled people, having suffered the mistreatment of normal society for so long, have the right to be angry, irrational, and use derogatory terms. I hope this has been a useful session, and I hope that this video helps understand the dangerous concept of normalcy, how the desire to be normal is a very human desire, how the desire to call someone a freak comes from a desire for belonging, comes from a desire for validation, and a desire to feel that we are a part of a community. These are not wrong things. These are not the privilege of disabled or able bodied people. Everyone has these desires. Therefore, the play helps us understand how and why someone who is made to feel disabled by normal society can feel the anger and frustration in order to use terms that may appear unfair to other normal people. I look forward to engaging more themes related to this play in subsequent lectures. Thank you.